The last race to Daytona. Some races are won with speed. Others are won with sacrifice. This is the story of a mechanic who never drove in the Daytona 500, never stood in victory lane, and never lifted a trophy over his head. But inside one quiet garage at Daytona International Speedway, people still remembered his name. Not because he finished first, because he made sure others had the chance to finish it all. This is the last race to Daytona. Chapter 1. Grandpa's Toolbox. The old red toolbox had not been opened in nearly 12 years. Dust covered the lid. The paint had faded from bright racing red to a dull rusty color. One corner was dented, and Caleb Reed remembered his grandfather always saying that dent came from the longest weekend of his life. Caleb never knew if the story was true. Grandpa Tom Reed loved stories. Some were real. Some became larger every time he told them. After the funeral, Caleb's family sorted through the garage. His uncle took the fishing rods. His cousin took the pocket watches. His mother kept the family photographs. Only the toolbox remained. "I'll take it," Caleb said. Everyone looked at him and smiled. It made sense. Caleb had become a mechanic because of Grandpa. He had spent nearly every Saturday of his childhood standing beside Tom Reed in a garage that smelled like motor oil, sawdust, and coffee. The toolbox was heavier than he expected. When Caleb set it on his own workbench and opened the latch, the metal clicked like it had been waiting for him. Inside were wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, spark plug gauges, racing gloves, and an old brass stopwatch. The stopwatch still worked. Tick, tick, tick. Beneath the bottom tray, Caleb found an envelope. Across the front were 2 words. For Caleb. His hands became still. He opened it carefully. Inside was an old laminated credential. Daytona International Speedway. Garage access. 1987 Daytona 500. The photo showed Grandpa much younger, wearing blue mechanic coveralls and smiling like he knew a secret. There was also a handwritten note. "Caleb, if you're reading this, my final race is over. Yours is just beginning. Drive to Daytona Beach. Do not fly. Take the highways. See the ocean. When you arrive, go to Garage 14. Someone has been waiting a long time. And remember this. The race is not over until everyone crosses the finish line. Love, Grandpa." Caleb read the note 3 times. Garage 14. Daytona Beach. A race from 1987. Grandpa had never talked much about Daytona. He had mentioned it from time to time, usually while working on an engine or watching old race highlights on television. But he had never said he worked there. He had never said someone was waiting. 2 days later, Caleb loaded the toolbox into his pickup truck and headed south. Chapter 2. Southbound. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon in the morning light. Caleb kept one hand on the steering wheel while the other rested near Grandpa's toolbox on the passenger seat. Every bump in the road made the stopwatch inside tap softly against the metal. Tick, tick, tick. The sound reminded him of being 8 years old, standing in Grandpa's garage, holding a socket wrench nearly too big for his hand. "Before you fix something," Grandpa had said, "you have to understand why it stopped working." Caleb had stared at the old lawn-mower engine in front of him. "I don't know why it stopped." Grandpa smiled. "Good. That's where every good mechanic starts. Not knowing." Exactly. They spent 3 hours taking the engine apart. Every bolt went into a coffee can. Every spring was placed on an old towel. Grandpa never hurried. He believed machines deserved patience. When the mower finally started, Caleb jumped backward. Grandpa laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. "You fixed it," Tom said. "No, you fixed it." Grandpa shook his head. "I showed you where to look. You did the work." Caleb never forgot that. The miles rolled by. Georgia disappeared behind him. Pine trees gave way to marshes. White birds stood still in shallow water. Fishing boats drifted through narrow channels. The farther south Caleb drove, the warmer the air became. By afternoon, he crossed into Florida. At the Welcome Center, he found one of Grandpa's old Daytona travel brochures tucked between the seat and the toolbox. Across a photo of the Speedway, Grandpa had written, "Never forget, the people in the garage make the race possible." Caleb smiled.
Even now, Grandpa was still teaching him.
Late that day, the road curved east. Then the air changed. Salt water. Ocean wind. Caleb rolled down the window. Palm trees lined the road. The sky opened wide. Then, beyond the hotels and dunes, he saw the Atlantic Ocean stretching to the horizon. For the first time since leaving home, the trip no longer felt like an errand. It felt like an adventure. Daytona Beach appeared at sunset. Hotels lined the shore. Families walked along the sand. The boardwalk lights glowed. A Ferris wheel turned slowly above the buildings. Farther inland, rising over everything, stood Daytona International Speedway. Caleb pulled into the motel parking lot and stared at it. "So this is where your story began," he whispered. The stopwatch ticked softly in the toolbox. Chapter 3. The Beach Awakens. Caleb checked into a small beachfront motel called Sunrise Sands.
It was not fancy.
The blue paint was faded, the office smelled faintly of sunscreen, and the room key was attached to a wooden keychain shaped like a surfboard. The owner, an older woman named Evelyn, smiled as she handed it to him. "First time in Daytona?" "Yes, ma'am." "Vacation?" Caleb looked down at the toolbox in his hand. "Not exactly. My grandfather used to come here." Evelyn smiled. "Then you've already been here." Caleb looked confused. She laughed softly. "That's the funny thing about family stories. Sometimes you know a place long before you ever see it." That evening, Caleb walked the boardwalk. The Ferris wheel glowed with tiny lights. Children laughed near the arcade. Families carried ice cream cones. A roller coaster rattled somewhere in the distance. The Atlantic rolled steadily against the beach. Near the end of the boardwalk, Caleb found an old man sitting on a bench with a small telescope pointed toward the moon. "Beautiful night," the man said. "It is." "You here for the race?" "No," Caleb said. "I'm here because of my grandfather." "What was his name?" "Tom Reed." The old man lowered the telescope. "The mechanic?" Caleb froze. "You knew him?" "Not well. But I remember him. He came out here every race weekend. Never missed a sunrise." "What did he do?" The man looked toward the ocean. He watched. Watched what? Everything. The fishermen. The birds. The waves. The families. He said if you watched long enough, you could learn something from every person. Caleb smiled. "That sounds like him." The old man stood slowly. "Sunrise is better." If Tom Reed came to Daytona, he watched the sunrise. You should too. Before dawn, Caleb walked to the beach carrying the toolbox. The sand was cool beneath his shoes. A few surfers paddled into gentle waves. A woman walked her dog near the water. The sky turned from deep blue to violet, then orange. The first edge of the sun appeared over the Atlantic. Golden light spread across the water. Caleb opened the toolbox. Beneath the racing gloves, he found a photograph he had not noticed before. Grandpa sat on this same beach in a folding chair, holding coffee, watching the sunrise. On the back, he had written, "The race begins long before the engines start." Caleb looked toward the speedway in the distance. Garage 14 was waiting. Chapter 4. Garage 14. The next morning, Caleb walked through the gates of Daytona International Speedway. The place felt alive. Golf carts moved between buildings. Mechanics rolled tires across concrete. Visitors took photographs of famous cars. Somewhere beyond the grandstands, an engine roared. Caleb carried Grandpa's toolbox toward the far end of a row of garages. Garage 14 stood quietly apart from the others. The paint had faded. The number 14 above the door was cracked. The concrete floor was stained with decades of oil, rubber, and hard work. Inside, an elderly man stood behind a wooden workbench. He wore blue coveralls and a faded Daytona cap. "You must be Caleb," he said. "How did you know?" The old man smiled. "Because you're carrying Tom Reed's toolbox." Caleb stepped closer. "You knew my grandfather?" "Knew him? I argued with him almost every weekend." The man held out his hand. "Hank Morrison, retired crew chief." Caleb shook it. Hank poured coffee from a dented thermos. "Your grandfather believed important conversations happened over bad coffee." Caleb laughed. "That sounds right. Hank led him to a wall covered in photographs. Race cars, drivers, mechanics, victory lane celebrations, cookouts beside transport trucks. In one photograph, Grandpa stood beside an old white and blue stock car, covered in grease and smiling. That was race week, Hank said. 1987. Did Grandpa win? Hank laughed softly.
No.
Finished 26th. Caleb looked confused. Then, why does everyone remember him? Hank turned toward the old garage. Because the next day, he showed everyone what winning really means.
Chapter 5. Race Week.
February 1987. 5 days before the Daytona 500. Long before the grandstands filled with fans, the garages were already awake. Transport trucks rolled through the gates before sunrise. Air compressors hissed. Coffee brewed by the gallon. Mechanics unpacked toolboxes and checked parts. Tom Reed arrived just after 6 o'clock. He lifted the red toolbox from his truck and breathed in the cool Florida air. Every year, that first morning at Daytona felt the same. Like coming home. Garage 14 held a white and blue stock car on jack stands. It was not the newest car in the field. It was not the fastest. The team did not have much money. But Tom knew every bolt in that car. Every weld. Every hose. Every sound the engine made. The driver, Jack Sullivan, arrived carrying coffee. You sleep? Jack asked. Tom smiled. I've got next week to sleep. By mid-morning, Garage 14 had become a gathering place. One team needed a drill. Another had lost a special wrench. Someone else needed safety wire. Tom never asked who they worked for.
He pointed to his toolbox.
Second drawer. Help yourself. Jack watched him. Aren't you worried they won't bring it back? Tom smiled. If they need it tomorrow, they'll know where to find me. Every tool returned. Sometimes cleaner than before. Later, a young mechanic hurried in carrying a damaged carburetor. Mr. Reed, I think I ruined this. Tom looked up. Call me Tom. The young man's hands shook. My crew chief is going to fire me. Tom inspected the cracked housing.
No.
He's going to teach you. What if he doesn't? Tom opened his toolbox and pulled out another carburetor. Then I will. The young mechanic stared. You have another one? Tom smiled. I have two. Now we both have one. That evening, after most teams had gone back to their hotels, Tom stayed in the garage. He wiped fingerprints from the body panels, checked fuel lines, ran his hands across the tires. Not because he expected a problem, because paying attention was how he respected the work. Far away, beyond the garages, the Atlantic Ocean rolled onto Daytona Beach. Tom could hear it if he stood still long enough. Chapter 6. The Longest Lap. Race morning arrived with a sky so clear it looked painted. Before daylight reached the grandstands, Garage 14 was already awake. Tom unlocked the door first. He stood beside the number 14 car and rested one hand on the hood. Let's have a good day, he whispered. The crew arrived one by one. Jack handed Tom coffee. You nervous? Tom asked. A little.
Good. Good.
If you're not nervous before something important, it probably isn't important. Outside, fans poured into the Speedway. Children waved checkered flags. Vendors called to customers. The smell of grilled food drifted across the infield. The command echoed over Daytona. Gentlemen, start your engines. The engines fired. The sound shook the ground. The green flag waved. The Daytona 500 had begun. The opening laps went smoothly. Lap 5. Lap 10. Lap 18. Tom clicked the stopwatch each time Jack crossed the line. Everything looked right. Oil pressure, water temperature, tire wear, fuel usage. Then came lap 47. A puff of smoke. One car twitched. Another clipped its bumper. Suddenly the backstretch disappeared behind smoke, metal, rubber, and noise. The crowd fell silent. Tom's stopwatch slipped from his hand and struck the concrete. The radio crackled. Caution! Multiple cars. Then another voice came through.
Weak. Panicked.
Driver trapped. Tom looked toward the smoke, then toward his own pit stall. His team was still in the race. Every second mattered. The crew chief grabbed his arm. "If you leave now, we lose our chance." Tom looked him in the eye. "If I stay, someone else may lose everything." The crew chief let go. Tom grabbed the red toolbox and ran. Chapter 7. The finish line isn't here. Pittsburgh Road had never felt so long. Mechanics from other teams were running too. Fire crews raced toward the wreck. Medical workers carried equipment. For those few minutes, there were no rival teams. Only people helping people. The damaged car sat against the wall. The driver's door was crushed. The front suspension had folded under the frame. A rescue worker shouted, "We need another jack." Tom dropped his toolbox. "Use mine." He knelt beside the window. "You with me?" A weak voice answered. "My leg stuck." Tom smiled. "You're talking. That means we're already having a better day." The driver laughed once. Even through the fear, Tom studied the bent metal. "Lift here." "No." 2 inches farther. The jack rose. Metal groaned. Another mechanic held a light. A firefighter stabilized the frame. Slowly, the opening widened. The driver's leg came free. The medical team helped him out. The grandstands erupted into applause. Not because someone had won. Because someone was alive. Tom stepped back. His hands were covered in grease. His shirt was soaked with sweat. He quietly picked up his scattered tools one by one. Just another mechanic cleaning up after another day's work. Back in Garage 14, the race was lost. Too many laps had passed. Jack eventually finished 26th. That evening, the team owner asked Tom, "Would you do it again?" Tom did not hesitate. Every single time. Jack walked over and said, "I'm sorry I didn't give you a better finish." Tom placed a hand on his shoulder. "You brought the car home." "I finished 26. Tom smiled. "You finished. That matters." Chapter 8. The stories that never made the newspaper. Back in the present, Hank closed the old photo album. Caleb stood in Garage 14, silent. "I thought Grandpa just fixed cars," Caleb said. Hank smiled.
He did.
But that's not all he fixed. He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a stack of letters. Christmas cards. Thank you notes.
Postcards.
All addressed to Tom Reed. Caleb picked up one. "Dear Tom, I almost quit after Daytona. You reminded me everyone starts somewhere. I'm now crew chief for our team.
Couldn't have done it without you."
Another Reed. "Mr. Reed, you probably don't remember me. I was the young mechanic who borrowed your timing light. I still have the one you gave me. Every apprentice in our shop learns with it. Thank you." Caleb lowered the stack. "I had no idea." Hank nodded. Tom never talked about these. Why? He didn't help people to collect thank you letters. Outside, an engine fired. The sound rolled through the garage. Hank smiled. Every February, mechanics still stop by. They ask if this is Tom's garage. Even now. Even now. How do they know? Hank looked at the photo wall. Stories travel farther than race cars. Chapter 9. The Last Letter. As evening settled over Daytona, Caleb opened Grandpa's toolbox again. Inside the top drawer, beneath a folded shop towel, was one final envelope. On the front were 4 words. Open after Daytona ends. Caleb opened it carefully. Dear Caleb, if you are reading this, then you have seen Daytona the way I hoped you would. Not from the grandstands. Not from television. But from the garages. That is where the heart of racing has always been. People think races are won by drivers. They are wrong. Drivers cross the finish line. But hundreds of people help them get there. Mechanics. Engine builders. Tire changers. Safety workers. Volunteers. Families. Even the people who sweep the garage floors after everyone goes home. Never forget this. Every great accomplishment is built by people whose names most will never know. I was not special. I simply showed up every day. I tried to leave every garage a little better than I found it. Funny thing is, that works for life too. Leave every place a little better. Leave every person a little happier. Leave every day with fewer regrets than yesterday. If you can do that, you will never have to wonder whether you won. Love.
Grandpa.
Caleb lowered the letter. Garage 14 felt peaceful, as if the building had finally shared the story it had been holding for nearly 40 years.
Chapter 10.
The museum. The museum curator arrived just before closing. His name was Robert. "I've been waiting to meet you," he told Caleb. "You knew Grandpa?"
No.
"But I've heard about him for 25 years. Hank brought out a small wooden box. Inside was Grandpa's favorite chrome wrench mounted on a plaque. Tom Reed, mechanic, mentor,
Friend.
the man who reminded us that every team deserved the chance to finish. Presented by the Mechanics of Daytona. 1988.
Caleb stared at it.
Grandpa never accepted this. Hank shook his head. He said it belonged to everyone. They carried the display into the museum. Robert placed it inside a glass case beside Grandpa's Daytona credential and the photograph of Tom watching the sunrise on the beach. A plaque was added beneath it. Tom Reed never won the Daytona 500. He never owned a race team. During the 1987 Daytona 500, he left his own team to help rescue another driver. His team lost the race. Tom never regretted that decision. He believed racing was about more than finishing first. He believed every competitor deserved the chance to cross the finish line. Caleb read every word. Hank smiled. He'd say the plaque is too long. Caleb laughed. He definitely would. Chapter 11. Another sunrise. The next morning, Caleb woke before the alarm. He carried Grandpa's toolbox back to the beach. The sky was still dark blue, with the first orange light beginning to touch the horizon. The tide had washed away yesterday's footprints. Everything felt new. He sat on the same weathered bench and watched the sunrise. A thin ribbon of gold appeared where the sky met the ocean. The Atlantic began to sparkle. Pelicans glided low across the water. A few families arrived with towels. Surfers paddled into the waves. Daytona Beach slowly woke up around him. Caleb opened the toolbox. There were no more letters. No hidden photographs. Only tools. Wrenches polished smooth from use. Screwdrivers with worn handles. A tape measure faded by sunlight. He picked up the old adjustable wrench. It was not rare. It was not valuable. But Grandpa had held it. Built with it.
Helped with it.
Taught with it. Caleb smiled. "It's your turn," he whispered. On the drive home, Caleb noticed things he might have missed before. A father helping his daughter cast a fishing line. A waitress laughing with an elderly couple. A mechanic changing a tire for a stranded family on the shoulder of the road. Caleb pulled over. He grabbed Grandpa's toolbox and walked toward them. "Need a hand?" The father looked relieved. "I'd appreciate it." 20 minutes later, the tire was changed. The little girl waved as they drove away. "Thank you." Caleb waved back. Then he looked down at the toolbox. Grandpa had been right. You did not have to be at Daytona to make a difference. You just had to be willing to help. Months later, Caleb's repair shop changed. People came not only because the work was good, but because someone always explained the repair. Young mechanics found patient teachers. Customers were treated with respect. No one left embarrassed for asking questions. Above Caleb's workbench hung a wooden sign. "Leave every garage better than you found it." Whenever a new apprentice joined the shop, Caleb opened Grandpa's toolbox, handed them the old adjustable wrench, and smiled. "Looks like we've got ourselves a lesson." Epilogue. The green flag. Years later, visitors to the Daytona Museum often stopped in front of a small display. It was not the largest exhibit. It was not surrounded by championship trophies. But people paused. They read the plaque. They looked at the old wrench. They saw the photograph of Tom Reed watching the sunrise over Daytona Beach. Parents explained the story to children. Retired mechanics quietly nodded. Young technicians stood a little longer than everyone else. Each person took away something different, but most left with the same thought. Winning is not always about finishing first. Sometimes it is about helping someone else finish. Far outside the museum, engines roared as another race began. Fans cheered. The green flag waved. Somewhere, a young mechanic tightened the final bolt on a race car. Somewhere, a driver trusted the hands that had prepared it. And somewhere, without even knowing his name, they carried forward a little of Tom Reed's legacy. Not because of a trophy, not because of fame, but because kindness, once shared, travels farther than any race car ever could. As the final lines of the Daytona drawing appeared on the paper, the pen lifted gently from the page. The city was complete, the story was complete, and another journey had come to an end. Every city has a story. Thank you for letting us draw this one together.